Hi folks, welcome to another episode of Shit You Wish Your Building Did, a show where we take an unvarnished look at the technology in our buildings. In this episode, I'm talking to software as a service expert, Elisa Rönkä. We take a deep dive into the impact of AI on smart building software applications. Will AI agents effectively eliminate the need for software as a service building platforms? And if so, will this disrupt the value chain? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you like the episode. There's a button specifically for that down below. Please click it. So let's jump right in. Elisa, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, James.
Really pleased to have you here. I think get straight into it. I think the first question for you that I wanted to ask, I've seen a lot written about AI agents. Some people saying they think it's going to be around 70% of SaaS kind of applications that are going to be disrupted by agents specifically. So I think my first question to you is, do you agree with that? And secondly, does that also apply within that 70%? Do you think that would include a lot of building management applications?
Yeah, good question. So I firmly believe that, yes, Agentic AI will, in some shape or form, disrupt the current SaaS applications. The reason I say this is twofold. One, I think up until today, and especially in our industry, we've had some challenges in kind of the return on investment for SaaS applications because of this recurring revenue, subscription-based business models. And I believe that with Agentic AI, we will be more and more focusing actually on the outcome that will be achieved, because Agentic AI will be automizing, let's say, a lot of workflows within the software. And hence, for the humans or the users, the value is in whatever kind of comes out from that. Contrary to how SaaS solutions today have been more about getting access to a tool and maybe deriving information out of it then to continue your tasks. Now you're kind of moving the tasks into that software to be done independently by agents. So I think that is the big shift that will definitely be disrupting the SaaS applications over time. It's not going to be overnight, but over time. And as for our industry, as said, we've had big struggles with the return on investment, I think, or showing the real value. And not because there isn't value. I mean, there's great SaaS applications out there in the market, and they absolutely can create value. But as an industry, we've been a bit slow in adopting them. We're not fully, let's say, utilizing its power, and we have a certain inertia in how we've been, operating buildings traditionally. And that has kind of caused that maybe the ROI to be a little bit more questionable in some cases. And our industry in general is very, let's say, ripe for disruption. We have a lot of dysfunction across the building life cycle. And we know that we have a huge generational shift happening and a skills shortage in all these kind of digital skills. So, all these kind of challenges that we've had already over time, but now that technology takes this huge leap forward in terms of the capabilities, and especially with the agents, I think these barriers to change that have held until now then won't hold forever, and that it will change also how we operate buildings for sure.
So, what is the difference between, let's say, if someone is used to working with ChatGPT? What is then the shift that happens with agents? How would you describe that?
Yeah, so of course the Agentic AI uses these large language models as a, let's say, a basis, or the capability from large language models, and also the challenges that come with it, such as hallucinations and adversarial effects, and those they will kind of carry over to the agents. But the biggest difference is that it's actually agents are replacing tasks and workflows that humans have been doing. So that is the biggest change. So instead of humans like us using, let's say, ChatGPT as a tool, we go in, we get what we want out of it, and then we continue our daily tasks and workflows. here, those tasks and workflows are executed independently, proactively by the agents, and they are working towards an outcome themselves and learning along the way, and can even be socially quite, let's say smarter, at least on an acceptable level, in these kind of social contexts as well. So that's the biggest difference. But of course, the basis is all the development that has happened in the large language models. But it's on top of that, it has this workflow task integration in an independent way, not in a way that we prompt them to do, but they do it independently to reach a goal.
Yeah. Okay. Great description. And if we think about that a little bit more, then, so whilst we're using these kind of large language models as a tool at the moment, it will move towards, I guess, something which is more natural or occurs without us being involved in it. It's more autonomous. That's what agents are doing.
Yeah.
Do you think then that allows people, let's say with, you mentioned about workflows, so people who aren't used to programming or who just perhaps interface with certain tools, but would they be able to use agents in a way that they can do very specific tasks, so they can describe things to the AI?
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually just this week saw a demo of a MVP that's coming out into the market on how you can train, especially in our industry, these agents and different types of agents. So they had supervising agents and they had customer service kind of agents and different agents, but how you can train them, for example, from the anomalies that you see in the data. So kind of, which is what I find really fascinating, is that now the innovation is also shifting into how can we as humans teach agents or AI to be better performing in certain contexts, in this context, real estate or the building data. And that, is done in a user-friendly way with an interface that us humans can manage and can understand without having to understand programming. So I think definitely, there is a lot of new development around that area on how can we train agents to do then the repetitive tasks or the kind of tasks that they can just simply do better because they can process a vast variety and amount of information, which we humans just simply cannot. I mean, we are only humans, and we should be used for the tasks that we are best at, and then use artificial intelligence for the tasks that they are better and more intelligent at.
Yeah, no, great point. You mentioned earlier, and in the answer to your first question, I think, about how, it's quite a complicated industry. It's ripe for disruption, like things that, of course, we've been talking about for years and years. And I think that can be on two levels, right? That's not just the technology, but also the value chain and how products and services are brought to market and who uses them eventually. Do you see disruption not just in the technology, but also in the value chain? And if so, what are your thoughts about how that might play out?
So absolutely. I mean, if we think about the whole concept or the point of agentic AI is, again, to move tasks and workflows to be executed without human interference, let's say. So that means that there's a lot of players in the market who have been, up until now, focused on servicing buildings or working, executing these tasks and workflows. I mean, it's an army of people out there. And that will inherently change. It doesn't mean that they will become obsolete per se, but it will definitely require a certain repurposing of a lot of building services that have been executed in the traditional manual way up until now, and repurposing then, okay, what is then the role of humans? What is kind of strategically important to be done by humans so that the outcome is what we want, and on the other hand, what is important to be executed by computers. So this is the part that I think will definitely be disrupted in terms of how do we service the buildings, and how do the companies that are focused on servicing buildings, how will they redefine themselves? How will they, utilize the efficiency gain that comes out of leveraging agents in a way that also maybe the customer side or the buyer side will benefit, because at some point, of course, they will catch onto that, let's say, benefit or that efficiency gain as well. And, you kind of have to divide that benefit between the suppliers and the users or the customers. So definitely there is some disruption happening on this side as well, on how we service the buildings and how do those companies who service the buildings operate from now on. The other disruption, as we discussed a while ago, is then on this kind of commercial model or business model side, that how will the SaaS then transform for those who are now delivering software applications to the buildings. So it's a very exciting time in terms of, inherently how we operate buildings will change.
Yeah. Yes, I to that point again, obviously buildings are physical objects, right, that live and last for a long time. So that's not going to change. And the fact that hardware needs to be installed, again, though, that's not something that an AI will be able to do. But I mean, things like commissioning, right, which we know is often not done properly, commissioning of systems. But so maybe that can be automated more than it currently is, and even sort of more on the services side, of course, like some of the consulting that goes on and the energy services, for example, could see a lot of those being changed and disrupted.
I fully agree. And if you look at, how expensive it is to commission a building, or to, when you deploy a new application, let's say, or anything, new technology, you have this onboarding costs that are often much higher than the actual recurring costs or operating costs of the system. So, that if that can, and if and when that will be done more efficiently, that means that the price point has to go down for the customers. That means the threshold to adopt new technology goes down, and that should really accelerate the adoption of smart or smartness, whatever that then may be, or in which form of technology that might be deployed in buildings. But again, that comes then down to, it has to, the benefit, it has to be a benefit for both the supplier and the customer. If you just take the efficiency or try to take the efficiency gain only on the supplier side and basically just reap higher margins, that might not fly in the end.
No, exactly. Something that's interested me around this topic as well is data ownership. It's been a topic in building technology for a long time. Who owns the data? And I think there's certainly a push that it should be the building owner and the operator that is ultimately the owner of the data of the building produces. Does AI change that? So if AI agents become the primary interface and the primary user, I guess, of building data, does that change the ownership model? Does it become does the concept of data ownership kind of become meaningless in itself?
That's $1 million question. So, I mean, there has been a lot of commotion and talk about, in general, data ownership, and and now when we look at all these new AI models that are being trained, DeepSeek was a great example, or now with the Japanese studio animation style, that was another commotion that was happening about, was this right or not to train the AI models on proprietary data, but yet there is access to this proprietary data, so it is possible, and hence it is being done, and so data becomes just so accessible that even when we have different means of trying to protect contractually or, from a legislation perspective, the ownership of data, it might not become so relevant anymore, because anyway, the usage is happening. So I think here, the question is that, can or should legislation keep up with it? I mean, only now in September we'll get the European Data Act, which is about the ownership of data, live here in the European Union, and it's only the European Union, but it sets an example, and there basically it's mandated that you need to have access to the data from the usage of a connected device, that the data is part of the product, hence the owner of the product owns the data. Perfect. But again, if the usage cannot be controlled, even with all the good intent in this world, then remains to be seen that, what is the role of governance and legislation there? Is it even even possible in the future to control that? Very good question. And I guess time will tell.
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned, and we discussed about the buildings being, obviously physical objects. It's different from enterprise software, the software that goes into buildings. Do you, and part of a building is also that there's a kind of a big human element to it, right? Humans are the ones that occupy buildings. We're the ones that use them. We have that, the feelings that different buildings engender in us. Is AI, we sort of just trying to pursue this kind of automation without thinking too much about the human element? I mean, is that something that AI can help to improve, or is it just going to be about operational savings and, ultimately trying to improve ROI for the occupier as opposed to improving the user experience?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about how AI could, even capture these human sentiments in a building, because I think, we've had a lot of human-centric solutions and applications up until today without any kind of agentic capabilities. And we always struggle with how do we capture, human feedback, because manual feedback doesn't work. People just simply don't give enough of it. We're lazy. And that is, the feedback is what AI also will learn from. And there have been, all kinds of technologies and solutions that have aimed at, how do we capture that, how do we get a data or get into data format, the human sentiments and feedback. There's been talks about facial recognition, either by mirrors or by cameras, but that's, been seen as quite intrusive. There could be wearables that could capture data, measure stress, you name it, but also not maybe so widely accepted. So in the end, the problem is, how do we capture that data? Because AI doesn't help if we don't have that data from which AI learns. And, the more and more we expect personalized experiences in buildings and everywhere in life, but AI can only learn from then personalized feedback, right? And I'm still waiting to see, how can we capture it? And then the other topic is that in general, humans appreciate human interaction. I think that's clear. And, agents are very good and effective in certain things. But I mean, up until today, at least, you can mostly guess or identify if it's an agent or a human that you are interacting with. And I think this is okay in things like, rebooking travel or something like this that you need to do quickly. The goal is efficiency. So it's okay that an agent does it. But when we go to topics that might be a little bit more sentimental or, personal, be it around maybe innovation or collaboration or something like this, now in the context of a building, this agentic feeling might even become counterproductive. So that's also an aspect to take into account when we're pushing for kind of efficiency and agents, that, if it actually becomes counterproductive because it's not somehow doesn't feel pleasant enough or doesn't also support the well-being, let's say, in a building, then maybe it's time to pull back a little bit on the agentic side and add a little bit more of the human interaction.
Something that sort of bothered me a little bit as well, again, I don't know if you agree with this, but I feel like sometimes smart building technology is over-promised and under-delivered. Not always, but often. And part of that, I think, is not because the technology isn't good and doesn't have great applications, but it's just in the implementation of that technology. Do you think, with AI agents, are we just heading for another kind of cycle of under-delivering because of the implementation costs and the difficulty of implementation? Or do you genuinely, is this going to be different this time?
So, of course, we can only see it in hindsight, right? Yeah. Whether it was overpromised and under-delivered. But I really have a strong feeling that it will be different this time, because this implementation cost it's really a problem we have at the moment. So, even when there is the willingness and the intent to, deploy smart technologies or let's say applications or whatever it is, and where, the recurring or the operating cost could be reasonable and let's say digestible or absorbable by the customer, but then you need an upfront cost that can be, tenfold to the recurring or the operating costs. That creates a huge barrier to implement any of these technologies. So, manual labor is simply very, very expensive. The cost is fully loaded with, all the other costs that the companies, the suppliers need to carry in order to have those people in their workforce. So if you can take away a bit of that cost and then, as said, give that over to the customer side as well, that would really lower that barrier to entry in terms of deploying technology, and that would be very, very positive for our industry. And it doesn't mean that, now we don't need any humans and there will be, major job losses or anything like this, because we still need that manual labor piece. And it's just going to be more of an agent human hybrid where we use the humans for the things we need to use and we use the agents for where they are very, very efficient. And this is actually what the World Economic Forum is also predicting, this agent human hybrid, especially for kind of industrial maintenance kind of operations. So I think that, that could be a really, really welcome change for our industry and should be seen as an opportunity for both sides, both the supplier and the customer side, and not a threat.
For those listening who are sort of, I guess, really interested in or what might happen in the next 2 or 3 years, because, a lot of what we are talking about could be, 4 or 5 years or even longer out. But do you think there are some things that you will have an impact, or agentic AI will have an impact on, in the 2 to 3 year period?
Absolutely. So it will for sure impact, as I said, the commercial models. There will be some kind of shift, maybe not a radical one, but there will be more, as I said, focus on the outcome. So that's the first shift. I think the second change is in bit by bit moving from, let's say, having AI as co-pilots into automating some simple tasks and then more and more complex workflows as kind of we get more comfortable and as the capabilities get better and AI learns, also in the context of our industry. And the third thing I think that will happen is these kind of smart building platforms. I mean, we've always talked for a long time about platforms in our industry, but now they actually become really, really important because you need access to the data. You need standardized data and, let's say, context aware or contextualized data so that the agents can then perform their tasks very, very efficiently. So I think that is also another change that will happen, that these platforms become actually even more important than maybe they have been up until now, because it will be less about, being or having, let's say, interoperable apps for humans. It's more about agents being able to access the data, and then they can do that cross-pollination of the data very much better than humans can. So the whole smart platform or building platform or unified data layer topic, that will become, I think, the, where or it will become a prerequisite for that efficiency gain that we will gain from agents. So, and all of this, yes, will happen in the next 2 to 3 years, not radically overnight, but over time. So it's not it's not far in the future. It's really the immediate future that we're talking about.
Yeah, that's a really profound point, because throughout the last 10 years, we've been building dashboards for people to look at, right, and make decisions. And that's totally going to change, right? These agents are the ones going to be making decisions, and they're going to be the ones, they're not going to be reading a dashboard.
Yeah, and it's very interesting what will happen to kind of the UX side of things. I think that UX will move into how do we kind of give tasks from agents to humans then, because humans will have a different role in the workflow. It's no longer the whole workflow, it will be a part of the workflow. So, UX will also change in terms of the smart buildings. It's no longer having that really nice application and interface. I mean, I still think there will be a need for a human interface to see what's going on in the building and to be able to kind of have also that reassurance that everything's fine in the building and nothing requires now this human part of the work. So there is need for interfaces, but it's not the same kind of meaning as today, where everything has an app and everything has its own UI, and you're kind of trying to go through this app switching to get one information to the other information, that will change. So it's really interesting also how that part will change for our industry and any industry, to be honest.
Yeah. Yes. And of course you mentioned about the data, and I totally agree. Like the way that these models are trained, they require good data, and to make sure that you get good data out of the building should be machine readable and being well normalized and with context. So yeah, I totally agree with that. Like that's not going to change. In fact, it makes it even more important, right? That we have that you have good data, normalized and structured data that comes out of your building.
Maybe we can't hide behind anymore that excuse of saying, but it's so hard to access data. I think, it gets easier and easier to access data and normalize it, and then, then leave the intelligence to AI from it. But I think so far, we've always kind of fallen back to that argument of like, it's so difficult. And, the systems are so difficult to get data from. But I mean, we're also getting smarter in how can we leverage different things and systems in kind of getting the data in a, let's say, good enough quality for whatever the use case is. I think, for example, people counting is one of my favorite topics to talk about, because, a few years back, it was only the sensors, the people counting sensors that we could kind of use. And then we moved on to, Wi-Fi maybe could be used to get a proxy of how many people are in a space. And then now we have web conferencing equipment that's very capable of capturing the amount of people in a room. And so we suddenly have many ways or many roads that lead to Rome. So also kind of this argument of, but it's so hard to get the data out, is becoming, let's say, diluted as an excuse on why we can't create this progress in smart buildings.
Yeah, good point. Is there one specific topic, one specific bit of information you want listeners to take away from our conversation today?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing is that the change is inevitable, and it will come in various forms. As I said, in the commercial, in the technology, in how we operate buildings, it will inherently change everything that we kind of do in this area. And, I think the one takeaway is that everyone who works in our industry, or any industry for that matter, should kind of redefine their purpose. So, given that AI will now be doing this and that, and this will change, what does that mean for me in my role? How can I be more effective? How can I leverage the human side or the strengths that, we as humans have in my role and kind of remain relevant? And I wish that we would really start seeing it in that light as an opportunity and not as a kind of a threat and try to hold on or be protectionist over, be it your data or be it your role or be it your commercial model, but instead kind of see that as an opportunity. Because I think there's a high chance that we will get completely different players into this industry as well. Those who already have the agentic side embedded in them, from the IT side, for example, that have already done that in just different industries. So for them to move over to our industry and kind of automate tasks and workflows, given that the data is accessible, is not so, so far out of reach anymore. So if we, as our industry, just keep resisting and not seeing it as an opportunity, someone else will come in and see it as an opportunity. So that would be my number one kind of takeaway for everyone, that think about it. What will it mean for you? How can you redefine your role so that you come on top in this change and not, fall behind just because you're resisting or not believing in it or afraid?
Great point, and a good one to finish on. If people would like to follow you or contact you, what's the best way to do that?
Absolutely, via LinkedIn. I'm very active there. I'm talking about these topics there on a weekly basis. So absolutely feel free to connect there and send me a message, and I'm always happy to chat about it. It's my favorite topic at the moment, as it is so relevant and such a huge, massive, transformative topic.
Yeah, you post some really good content on LinkedIn, so I can recommend everyone to follow you.
Thank you.
And just to say thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
My pleasure, James. Always happy to talk about this topic.
Really interesting, and I'm sure It's going to evolve super quick. So maybe we have you back soon and to discuss what's been going on.
Sounds good.
Good stuff. Thanks a lot. Thanks everyone for listening. Bye for now.